Hey everybody, and welcome to Inside Quest. We're the early stage investment for your mind. Our goal is to bring on amazing people who can help you incubate a better brain. And if you're looking to raise the value of your intellect, there is truly no better guest than the man joining us today. He's a legendary investor whose resume reads like something ripped from the pages of a Hollywood screenplay. As a kid, against the advice of his parents, he invested his paper route money in the silver market. And as a high school student, he convinced a Golden Age Hewlett-Packard to let him intern so he could learn more about running a business. He founded and sold his first enterprise, an industrial CO2 laser company, in his mid-20s before attending business school, and his drive and cultivated intelligence led him to being aggressively recruited by the venture capital world, where he ended up working with some of the most astonishing minds in investing, including John Doerr at Kleiner Perkins. And like some kind of human talisman, during his tenure at Kleiner Perkins, he helped nurture two promising upstarts in their portfolio that you may have heard of, Amazon.com and Google. He also helped get AutoTrader started, and he had the vision to invest in SuccessFactors when it had only $2 million in revenue, helping it grow into the giant that was ultimately sold to SAP for $3.4 billion in cash. Oh, and lest I forget, he also co-founded the online behemoth, drugstore.com, and the wildly successful company Good Technology, which was sold to Motorola for a purported $500 million. Despite it being so easy to measure his impact in dollars, however, what makes today's guest so special is his humanity. One of the most humble and kind people I have met on my long journey to today, he is helping shape a new way of investing and building businesses that he calls the Evergreen movement. While this man's legacy will surely outlive him already, I believe his greatest contributions are only just now taking shape in his latest venture, the Tugboat Institute, an organization committed to supporting purpose-driven companies that are built to last. Please help me in welcoming the storied entrepreneur, legendary investor, the Pied Piper of the Evergreen movement, the founder of Tugboat Ventures, and my dear friend, Dave Whorton. How you doing? It is so good to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the introduction. That was very kind.
For sure, and very, very easy to write. For those who don't know, I've had the very good fortune of getting to know Dave over several years at this point, which has been amazing. And you, to me, really are everything that's right in the world of business. You're optimistic, you're kind, you're generous, you help other people, you love seeing other people succeed, you're wicked intelligent, you're very well read, you're on top of your game, and yet you seem really compelled to give back to other people and help them succeed. What are like three sort of key moments that have influenced your values that drive your behavior?
Three key moments. I'd say one moment was at HP. You talked about when I was 16 years old, and I worked in assembly work. I was stuffing circuit boards and soldering them. And I got to sit next to people who had worked there for 20, 25 years. And the way they talked about the founders of HP, incredible. The HP way, the stories, the treatment of people. So for me, as a young man, I thought, this is how all businesses are. They all treat people this way with tremendous respect and understanding. So I'd say that would be one that's stuck with me for quite a while. The second would be the experience working with John Doerr, and just the idea that an entrepreneur can take just the rawest of ideas and turn into something that changes the world. And I think he's done it as well as, if not better than anybody, in kind of identifying those opportunities and seeing the scale of impact that could be had. And the third is what really brought me to where I am today, and that was kind of what I call my hero's journey. You and I have talked about Joseph Campbell and his kind of his classic mythology around the hero's journey. And for me, it was meeting a woman who I'd backed at Kleiner Perkins, and she came to me in 2005 and she said, look, I want to start another business. This time I'm going to run it for the rest of my life. And my exit strategy is to be rolled out on a gurney. And I thought, oh, that's terrific. You're going to build a lifestyle business. Right. You earned that. You've been backed by venture capital, you've worked hard, you've earned the right to do that. And she was insulted. She bristled. She goes, what makes you believe I want to build a lifestyle business? I want to build a business that impacts the lives of hundreds of thousands of women, and it's going to be a global business and have tremendous impact in the world on the customers and the employees. And I said, you're going to have to raise venture capital and private equity to do that, and a lot of money to do that, and they're not going to let you run it for the rest of your life. That's incompatible. And she said, you're just wrong. That's not the way it's going to be. I don't have to raise that kind of capital. I can build from my own profitability and cash flows. I need a little bit of money to get off the ground, and I can achieve this vision. And she's very much done that. It's a company called Stella and Dot. It's a very successful business. Her name is Jessica Heron, and she's a wonderful woman. And she, for me, and that's why I make it the third, was the one that gave me the insight that I didn't even understand until years later.
Right. It's her story in particular is really incredible. Full disclosure, I consider Quest to be part of the Evergreen movement, which is originally how you and I came to be. A mutual friend told me as we were describing, so we started Quest, it was very much a reaction to our last business, which was designed to sell, get us out, make us rich, like the whole classic thing.
Right.
And then just had an emotional aversion to that and said, I'm never doing that again. I want to build something that I believe in. I want to be passionate every day. And I think like if that question were asked back of me, that was a really powerful realization that I wanted to enjoy what I did every day.
Yep.
And when you're chasing some grand end that is necessarily out in the future, right? Like attaining wealth is a finish line. So because there's not an adherence to something must be wonderful today, I must enjoy it, it must be an inherent part of how I view the world and how I want to experience the world, you can really lead yourself down just a terrible, terrible path. So it was so fascinating when he said, hey, I've got this guy, he's starting this thing called the Evergreen movement. He talks like you talk. You should just go check out his dinner. And then the funny thing, when we met, I didn't know it was you. So we bump into each other at this dinner. I was kind of the early new kid, and he just happened to be one of the guys standing there, introduced myself, and we end up talking about Alex Covarrubias.
We did.
That was when I realized, hey, whoever this guy is, like, he's really into people.
Right.
And that's when it all clicked. So I had formed my sort of early opinion of you as being somebody who cares deeply about people, cares deeply about the product, before I realized how insanely successful you were. And so when they introduced you at the dinner, it was like, God, I wish I could think of a classic movie where you think you're talking to the shopkeep and then you realize that the guy actually owns the store. And I think there's a moment like that in Miracle on 34th Street or something. Right. It was like that moment. Oh, no, this is the guy. So,
and that was a great experience for me because Tom's sitting in the back very humbly, very quietly, not asking a lot of questions. And I had never met you before, and you were invited by this mutual friend to this dinner in Santa Monica. And as I started talking to him, what an incredible human being. And the story of Alex he starts talking about is one that we do have to have a longer conversation about at some point. But this is a man that actually sees potential in every human being, incredible potential. And to be able to identify and be willing to take the risk of employing people who are ex-cons and give them opportunities, true opportunities, not BS opportunities, not washing the floors, but to someday lead a factory, to be part of the management team is an incredible story. And I don't think I tell that story all the time. I say the essence of being an Evergreen company is having the creative freedom to do stuff with people that is deeply held in your heart and your values. And you're a terrific expression of that.
I used to think that it was a choice between being sort of the ultimate version of yourself as a good and kind person and choosing between being good at business. Like I saw them as mutually exclusive paths. And I think that that's something that stops a lot of people from becoming entrepreneurs and pursuing that path because of the sort of age-old myth about, behind every great fortune is a great crime. And
right.
What do you tell people that think that way?
It's just the truth. It's just factually wrong. That if people live a life of deep purpose and they express that through the bringing together of human beings in a structure of a company, it's a very powerful way to bring that purpose to life. In fact, it's probably the most powerful way in the world to do it. There is no better vehicle than anything than the formation of a company that will be profitable and growing to be able to express that in a very lasting way. And so in my mind there is no incompatibility with being deeply purpose-driven and living an authentic life and expressing that set of values through your company, particularly if you own your business. And this is why the Evergreen idea is so powerful. You're not subjugating yourself to a different set of masters. And the trickiest master of all is somebody who has an exit orientation for your business. Because there's a set of things they need you to do in your business to create substantial value in a short amount of time that may not be consistent with your purpose or your values or how you want to treat people in the long term. And it's not in all cases. I mean, some people have done this very successfully. But this idea of Evergreen is that it creates an alternative by which you have the room to do that. We talked about in our publication, Evergreen Journal, earlier this week, Carrie Smith, the founder of Big Ass Fans. You look at Carrie. Carrie spent 10 years earning $1 million in revenue a year,
Wow.
trying to figure out his business. And what he was doing, he was selling misting systems on top of factories, very large factories to cool down the buildings. It actually worked fairly effectively, but people didn't see value in that. It took him 10 years to figure out they weren't seeing value, but he still wanted to solve the fundamental problem. And he secondly wanted to build a terrific culture and a culture of resistance. He talks about building a 200-year company.
Wow.
Well, then he realized what people really wanted was just these big-ass fans. You know, the employees saw them, they visualized it, they felt the air movement. It wasn't as efficient as the misting systems on the roof, but and then that business has taken off and it's doing over $200 million in revenue.
Whoa!
Yeah, so it took a
Wow.
long time, but the one thing Kerry would not do was reduce his vision or his purpose to some outside of investors. And I think, unfortunately, if he had taken outside investment, I don't think he would have gotten through the 10 years. I think some point along he'd been tapped on the shoulder and asked to leave the business.
Yeah,
or
for
they
sure.
said, return our capital and let's get out.
For sure.
And so now he's on the path of building this incredibly value-oriented, deeply cultured business. And it took time. And persistence.
Wow, there's a really powerful lesson in there about being willing to pivot, to change, because one thing I have deep fear in myself, and this is probably why I talk about it so much, is because I'm not a born entrepreneur, okay? So I did not come into, I had a paper route like you. I was too afraid to collect most of my money, so I wouldn't knock on the door. So if they didn't put it in the mailbox, I would keep delivering papers for free, right? At like 4 a.m, because I was so paralyzed by going up to the door. So I'm not like that guy who just, you talk to somebody like a Mark Cuban and he calls himself, I'm just a born entrepreneur, I have it in my DNA. I did not have a lemonade stand. I did not offer computer tutorials for the elderly. Like, I didn't do any of that stuff. And so for me to accomplish what I wanted, it's the same thing. When I was quite heavy set at one point. I was 230 pounds and now walk around 170. So 60 pounds heavier than I was. I had to codify nutrition just to escape a certain path. And the same thing is true for me as an entrepreneur. I've had to codify the world. So I've had to go, there are rules to being an entrepreneur. There's rules to being successful. There's rules to finding your centered, authentic self and building a business around that, right? Like my first attempts were not that. My first attempts were to deny everything about who I was as a human, to completely crush it down and live in service of money, right? And I thought it really made sense to me. And that's the terrifying part. Like I didn't think, oh, this is dumb, but I'm going to do it anyway. I was like, this is it. This is the shit. Like this is the path to success.
Well, because that's what our society reinforces.
100%.
Every magazine you read, every show you see, that's what it's talking about. It's like, how much money do you raise? At what valuation do you raise it? How much do you sell your company for? As that is some kind of mark on the impact you've had on the world.
Like, what's the recipe for entrepreneurial disaster? How do people trap themselves? What sort of beliefs hold them back? And what skill sets do they need to cultivate to be successful?
That's a big question, Tom.
Yeah, and if you give it to me, I will use it and run with it. I promise it will be worth your time.
So I think the biggest risk for an entrepreneur is fear. And it manifests itself in a lot of different ways. But the story I hear quite often, and I think it's a very sad story, somebody's actually in the process of building a successful business and then panics and feels like, and they hear this from their friends, they hear it from family, which is, your business is worth quite a bit now. Capture that value, sell your business, because otherwise what happens if there's a tough economy or something goes wrong or competition changes and you lose the whole thing and you've deprived your family of financial security. And that's part of the thing that you and I and others are talking about creating, which is there an alternative way to give people some protection where they can take some off the table but not change the path in which they're building that business for the long haul. Other things I'd say is, you hit it, the willingness to be humbled, and just continue to stay humble, that you don't have all the answers. So while you're kind of leading your company and trying to do that with a level of confidence, you're still a learner, you're still receptive to ideas. Not that you're jerking the organization around left and right, but that you just continue to allow yourself to grow. And I love telling stories. I'll tell another one about a woman named Melanie Delbucco who runs a company called Trini. And she had reached a point in her life and in the company, that she had just topped out. She couldn't figure out why the company wasn't growing anymore. She felt that maybe she was no longer the right person for the role. And then she did something really, really creative and smart, as she encouraged her management team and herself to go out and meet with lots of people and talk about innovation. Went and saw Tim Brown at IDEO, and David Kelly, went to a number of other companies.
Wow.
And suddenly realized, wait a second, there's this concept called S-curves, and I've just in kind of penetrating a market, and we've kind of penetrated our current market. We just got to go find another market or two markets. And so as an organization, they all came to this realization over about a year period, and then shifted into these new markets, and the business is growing very successfully again. But then what she did, which I gave her tremendous, back to fear, she was stuck. And fear could have taken over. She could have resigned her role. She could have sold the company. She could have done a lot of things. But instead, she just kind of opened up to the organization and said, I don't know if I'm the right person anymore or not, but let's go out and learn together, and then see where that takes us. And now the entire company, every employee is encouraged to go on what she calls a learning journey. It's an incredible experience.
That is really powerful. That's going to stick with me for a long time.
And let me say one other thing too, is with the wrong partners in your business, a situation like that, 95% of the time would have led to her losing her job.
For sure. Yeah, and that is something that we think a lot about here. Obviously, people are like, oh, you guys are going to go public, right? And we're like, are you out of your minds? Like, we must look crazy from the outside, but it works, right? And some of what we do, like this show, is super counterintuitive, but it's meaningful to me. Like, this show is meaningful to me as a person. It's a promise that I made to myself that I would give the mindset back to other people, because when I was in my early 20s, I felt hopelessly lost and I had no idea what to do. And got to the point, I was on unemployment, I was scrounging in my couch cushions for enough change to put gas in the car, all that. It's like living in that state and feeling like, God, what am I doing with my life, right? The whole notion of a quarter life crisis, which as I was going through it, that whole quarter life crisis movement was like booming, and I felt like all these other people feel the same, but that doesn't help because I still don't see a path out of it.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until I encountered what I now call the entrepreneurial mindset, or the Quest belief system, that I began to see, okay, I have to take ownership of my life. I have to accept that my life is an exact reflection of the choices that I've made, and that if I want a different result, I have to start making different choices. But in discovering all of that, right, I come to this total change in my life. It changes my life, it changes my family's life. It has a true and lasting impact on those that I love. And it all came from switching a mindset. So when we started this company, we said, the three of us all said, look, this is going to be something that's a platform for all the things that we care about. So right now, Ron is legitimately and passionately pursuing cancer. Like, he came to Mike and I and he said, look, I want to invest millions of dollars in cancer research. And we're like, what? We're not a drug company. Like, why would we do that?
Right.
But he was so deeply passionate about it and so believed that there was a food-based treatment protocol that could be added onto what was going on. And we said, absolutely. For me, it's the mind, right? I want to know what happens to the world when we find 1,000 new Jeff Bezos, Elon Musks, people who are really, they have something they believe in, and now they have the courage and just the emotional education to go and pursue that. Like, what does that world look like? And I want to live in that world.
That's awesome.
Which is why when I met you, I could feel that the Evergreen movement is the beginning of something new and incredibly powerful that takes that ticking time bomb of having a gun to your head and gives you the opportunity to take risk, and leads me to ask the question, why do you have a box of silver in your garage?
I just had this moment in time. I didn't read the newspaper as a kid. I enjoyed doing that's what we did back then, right? A few of us. And I saw that the silver market was starting to go up, and these gentlemen called the Hunt brothers down in Texas.
How old are you at this point?
I was 13, 12.
Okay.
Yeah. The Hunt brothers are trying to corner the silver market, so I thought that it'd be interesting to try to play in this. So I went down into a store and bought a bunch of silver coins and bars and turned all my cash in, took all the silver, and then I watched it keep running up. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm brilliant. I'm absolutely brilliant. And then I started getting nervous about it, because then I'm like, well, I didn't really understand why it was going up so much. And I talked to my dad about it, and I said, look, I probably should sell my silver. And my dad, who's become a better investor since then, he wasn't very good back then, he said, oh no, you either got to be a long-term investor or you're not, and you got to commit yourself to your investments. It was kind of said in essence. And so I didn't sell the silver, and I watched it go all the way back down.
Ouch.
So I've always held that silver to remind me that to be careful.
It's interesting how we all learn so much more powerful lessons from failures. And I've heard you talk about the silver before, and I've heard you say, on top of all of that, realizing that you don't want to be transactional and everything, but it also reminds you that risk is okay, right?
Right.
So yes, you lost money, right?
That's exactly
but
right.
It's a powerful reminder that at the end of the day, those who end up doing the most in their lives are those who dare
That's
the
right.
most greatly.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think the smartest entrepreneurs are always trying to find ways to reduce risk. They're not seeking risk.
Right.
They're trying to reduce risk. And also, you need patience. You need to be able to be resilient. You need to continue innovating. All these things we talk about, like evergreen companies. And that's one thing I'd say to entrepreneurs, back to your earlier question, is building a profitable company, that's a really noble thing. And to do it with a great culture and treat people well, whether you're a small company or a big company, is a really wonderful thing to do. All of that should come together. And so one of the things we like to say is, if you build an evergreen business but don't build an evergreen family, kind of shame on you.
Right.
Those also should be compatible, because that's a really important part of our lives. Our spouses, our children, our parents.
How would you define an evergreen family?
Well, unfortunately, the statistics show that a lot of very successful businesses don't make it through the second generation, and they don't make it through the third generation. I think it's maybe single digits go through 3 generations. And most of that I've learned in my research is related to family dynamics, not business dynamics.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and so, you can imagine this. Somebody's working really hard building their business, and they kind of put their family on hold.
Right.
And then they wake up one day, in their 50s or 60s, and like, wow, I've built this incredibly successful business. We're doing $1 billion in revenue. We're profitable. We own it. We're expressing a culture in our business that we're excited about. We're innovating our products. And oh, by the way, my kids will never come to the company because they hate it.
Yeah.
Because it represents dad or mom never being available. And so it's important not to make that set of trade-offs. I mean, include the family in the experience in a way that feels authentic to you.
Well, let's talk about that, because I think that's easier said than done. And I think that a lot of the people watching the show, they may not want to own their own company, but they would love to be able to marry their career and their family life more in a way that's truly enjoyably balanced. And I won't say that balanced in terms of equality, because some people, I think, want more time with family, and some people want more time being ambitious. But a balance that they choose.
Yeah.
How do they find that?
As you said, a very individual experience, but you don't find it by ignoring it. And a lot of people, unfortunately, are ignoring it. And that comes back to fear. They may have a fear of failure. They're so focused on the business, they assume the family will always be there for them. And I think people do it different ways. I've heard people that say, families that are very successful, multi-generational families, I call these the long-lasting evergreens, or the longest of lasting. They often have rules like the kids cannot work in the business until they've worked somewhere else for at least 5 or 10 years. So they can have an experience outside the business to see what it's like before they come into the business. Some have rules that the family members can't be part of the business at all. They got to go create their own businesses, and they'll be encouraged to do that, or go do other activities they're excited about. But I don't have a prescriptive answer for it, except for it's got to be a very conscious part of how you think about your life, is to keep that in consideration.
Let's say aliens came, they're about to load you on the mothership. They say, we're going to give you time to give one piece of advice to your kids, but only one piece. What piece of advice would you give them? Would it be about business, life in general, family? What would it be?
Gosh, Tom, you always ask these tough questions. Can I give 2 pieces of advice?
Sure.
Really pick your spouse or partner carefully. I mean, that can be the greatest joy of your life, is having a great life partner. The second would be, it's kind of going back to Joseph Campbell, which I love, which is, he has this theory of people should, in a sense, be camels, when they're young in their lives. You remember this? And you take on society's burdens. You do what society tells you to do. You work hard, you do the things your teachers say you to do, you do the things that your professors tell you to do, your boss tells you to do. But you'll have a moment in time, if you've done that really well, you'll become a very strong camel. And then the camel will then transform into a lion. And the strength of the lion will be reflected by the camel, by the behaviors you exhibited before. And so if you were a great camel, you'll become a very powerful lion. And the lion has only one task in life, and that's to kill a dragon. And that dragon has scales all over that say, you shall, you shall, you shall, which is society's description of what it expects of you. But if you're a strong lion, you kill that dragon, and then you become one of yourself, of your whole self. So you can now do anything you want in life because you've gone through this personal transformation. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that's what I would hope for my kids.
It does to me in such a powerful way. So reading Joseph Campbell changed my life. I got a tattoo because of Joseph Campbell.
Did you really?
Oh, yes. So hear me. So I'm reading his book, The Power of Myth. Every page is changing me more and more fundamentally at a deep human level and explaining to me how to take control of my own life. And he gets to the part where he's talking about the biggest problem with modern society is the lack of mythology and ritual.
Right.
And I was like, mythology and ritual, that's interesting. And he said, when you were 13 and they took you out into the forest and they kicked your teeth in and said, you're now an adult, you knew, well, that sucked, but there's a clear demarcation between my childhood and my adulthood. Yes. And he said, part of the reason I think there's such a high divorce rate is that there's nothing real and substantial that marks you the day before you're married and the day after. And the sort of clumsy rituals of walking down an aisle in a white dress, they don't get you there. There's nothing transformative about that. And he talked about ritualistic scarification. And I thought, I am getting married exactly once.
That's awesome.
And I take your advice to pick my partner very wisely. And I said, I am terrified of needles. I am terrified of tattoos. I never want to get one ever. But the fact that I'm terrified of them, because of that, I'm going to face that, ritualistically scar myself to remind myself the day before the wedding and the day after, I'm a fundamentally different human being. And so I designed a tattoo all in Greek because my wife is Greek, and then had it literally carved into my flesh as a reminder that from today forward, I'm a different human being.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
That is awesome.
When I say that resonates with me, it really, really resonates with me.
Yeah. Yeah. So that would be my second piece of advice.
Those are some good pieces of advice.
Be a good citizen, make the contributions, do what you're asked to do, but then there'll be a moment in time where you need to become yourself and really pursue what your deepest dream is. And
I fucking love that. So here's the thing, like, this is one of the most successful and wealthy people you're ever going to sit in front of, I promise you. And yet the advice that he's giving you has nothing to do with the accumulation of wealth. One of two things is true. Either he wants to keep you off his scent so he can go keep getting more and more of the money for himself and not have any competitors, or because he's realized something in the accumulation of that wealth, and that's fulfillment is the only thing that matters. And look, wealth creation is awesome, and it will do things for you that you can't even yet imagine. It's the great facilitator. It will make things possible.
It's a byproduct. It's a byproduct. It's not the goal.
Yes. Success, like happiness, cannot be pursued, it must ensue, right? Viktor Frankl. Like, you can't pursue happiness. You can't pursue it directly. It's got to be a byproduct of all the other choices that you make along the way. So let me ask you, what are the 2 or 3 key ingredients that make for a great entrepreneur? And before you answer that, let me set the scene. So as a venture capitalist, you see tons of people, something like 40 to 70 or something a month, people that come in, they pitch their ideas. So you're seeing person after person, idea after idea, but you personally only invest in like 3 to 4.
Right.
So that's a staggering reduction from the number of people that you see. So what is it that you're looking for in these people? What makes for a great entrepreneur?
Yeah, it's funny. Another great question. That has evolved over time for me, and in very important ways. There's a gentleman named Whorton Denver that I have got to know recently. He was the commander of the Navy SEALs, and we've talked a lot about this. But what they learned is that character is the most important determinant of success in the Navy SEALs. And they had to go through this themselves. They were recruiting people because of their GPAs and their SAT scores and the fact that they were varsity athletes. And they found over time that often the most successful Navy SEALs, in their capabilities and their perseverance, in their teamwork, were not the top grades. Yep. And they weren't the perfect SAT scores. And frankly, they weren't the stars on the football team or the basketball team. But there was something deeply held within them. That set of characteristics are so much more important than I'd call the more flashy, publicized set of characteristics you might look for in an entrepreneur.
So walk us through then the process, however long it may be, for you to go from, I just heard you pitch and I've never seen you before in my life, to I'm going to give you millions of dollars to pursue your idea based on character.
So I think it's all in their life story.
So literally I walk in, hi Dave, my name's Tom, and we somehow get into my life story?
Yeah, so would you be willing to tell me your life story, Tom? And then somebody immediately starts with, I went to college. I go, no. Where were you born?
Really?
Where were you born? And tell me about your dad.
This is the weirdest VC. As someone who's been to VC interviews, this is already the weirdest one I've ever been.
Tell me about your mom. What were the values that they espoused?
Wow.
What did you learn from your mom? What did you learn from your dad? How about, do you have siblings, brothers and sisters? What were they like? How did you guys get along? What did you gain from them? How did they shape you? You know, and some are very sad stories too. I mean, they've gone through incredible hardship. But out of that hardship, it didn't lead to bitterness. it led to inspiration and a desire to do something more for themselves and for the people that they wanted to surround themselves with. So that's where these things come out. And I'll tell you another story that Whorton told me that I thought was really interesting. And so they developed this panel of people bringing in candidates to go into the Navy SEALs and go into training. And they had just lost 5 or 6 Navy SEALs in a helicopter crash the day before. And so candidate after candidate after candidate came in and was interviewed. And he said, well, this one candidate came in into the day, long hair, Berkeley guy, didn't have the resume at all that you'd expect, for that. And had a very, very authentic, kind of warm conversation. As he went to walk out the door, he opened the door and then he closed it and he turned around and he said, I wanted to say, I'm sorry for your loss. The only person the entire day that acknowledged they had lost their colleagues.
Wow.
And he said, that guy, immediately into the program, has been one of our best SEALs.
Wow.
Because he's empathetic. He understands, he cares for other people, and a very important part of the SEALs, which I didn't understand. It's not just your grit and your perseverance and your resilience. It's like, it's how do you treat each other? How do you care for each other and watch out for each other? You have to have absolute, complete trust. I think that also is a really important characteristic in business. Just incredibly high levels of trust.
I agree with that so aggressively. Geez, I hope Mike and Ron don't mind me sharing this, but so we actually sat down and said, no matter what, I will never vote against the two of you, right? Like, so the three of us, we just have that pact. Like, good luck, right? Even if I think Mike and Ron are acting the fool and that they will cause me to go bankrupt personally, I'll never vote against them, right? Like, and you have to play those scenarios out. It has to be the scenario where I think you're wrong and I think you're going to devastate the company and me personally, and I'm still not going to vote against you. And because we, for so long, believed that our highest value was profitability, and that it felt right when I said it at the time, and we had this pact, we'll always do what's more profitable. And then over time, I had this gnawing in my gut that I was acting out of alignment with something, right? And I couldn't figure out, what is it? Something is driving me nuts. I don't feel good when I go in. Like, this was back in the technology company. I just have this unease that has grown into a true malaise, right? And so now I'm fundamentally and deeply unhappy. And I finally realized the truth is, the thing that I care most about are these two guys. Yeah. Like, I care about the one story. Like, I actually feel emotional right now just thinking about this. The one story that always meant something to me was, we used to joke, but there was so much truth in it that it was always a fun story to tell. That if Ron or Mike, if you ever find yourself in a Thai prison, you know to call me first. I will get you out of that Thai prison. Like, whatever it takes, by any means necessary, you're getting out of the prison.
Right.
So, and to know that you had these two people that they were committed to that, it's just awesome. And then awesome. That became the founding principle here. We hire specifically for compassion. Yeah. And one of the reasons, that's one of the 3 core tenets that we look for in people. And the reason is, I need to know that you love it when your teammate succeeds. Because if you're unhappy, jealous, bitter when your teammate succeeds, we'll tear apart from the inside long before the competitors get to us. So it's interesting. I didn't know that the Navy SEALs look for that. It makes total sense.
Yeah, and so that's why I think this idea of Evergreen is just so important. Because if you start at the top with purpose, authenticity, and trust, and you got a reasonably good idea, or at least you stick with it, if you have to like Carrie for 10 years until you get the right idea, you could do something really impactful in the world.
The reason that I think the advice that you give your kids is so powerful is that if I had known, and by extension, if you guys all know, as early as possible, that what you're really chasing is to build something that is of service to other people, right? That there's just an innate human driver compelling you to connect. And because we live in this hyper-social world where people want to feel connected to the real people behind the company, right? They want that. They want to know that there's something real behind this product that they're buying. It's why we gravitate towards the heroes in a company. Someone like Steve Jobs, right? To take just an extreme example. People felt like they knew him. They felt connected to him, and the products by extension were a representation of him and what he stood for, and it made them feel good because they shared similar values. And when you you can build something like that and can invite your teammates in to build that with you, now you get that trust. Now you're acting in accordance with just innate human drivers. And I find that when a company is out of sync, it's usually because they reject some fundamental notion, right? Our software company was out of sync because we rejected the fundamental human notion that people would actually be able to enjoy who we were as people, that we could be authentic. As quirky and weird as the three of us together are, that we could really be authentic and build a bigger and better company out of that because we'd make those counterintuitive decisions because we had just those internal drivers, right? We want to do what brings value. That's it. Like, why are we pursuing cancer? We're pursuing cancer because we actively believe that it's a nutritionally based challenge, right? We believe that it's a metabolic disease. And if it's a metabolic disease, it's going to be a food company that solves the problem. And the problem that we really face is a problem of compliance. And somebody has to do the hard work of doing that. Ron just happens to be incredibly passionate about digging in and reading the research and figuring this stuff out. And so, even though everyone thinks we're out of our minds, it was a very easy decision for us to say, yeah, we're going to throw millions of dollars at this thing and let's see where it goes. And the honest answer is it may go nowhere, right? It may totally fail. Oh, we were wrong.
Or it may transform your entire business.
Also very possible.
Yeah, you might look back 20 years from now and say, that was just the beginning of what became this incredible experience that we had together. Started with just one of us being very passionate about that idea, which is Ron.
Yes.
And so good for Ron.
Tell us, if you would, about what you're doing in the school system, because it's pretty incredible. Why it's important to you.
So context first, I guess, is that I believe, and this has been influenced very much by Madeline Levine, who's a child psychologist out of Marin, amazing woman, wrote the book Price of Privilege, that we have so narrowly defined success for our kids that it doesn't leave much room for most of our children. And it kind of touches on some of the points I said earlier with work. It's about the grades. It's about the SAT scores. It's about the extracurricular activities. It's building these pristine resumes so that your child has the maximum opportunity to get into the best college possible. It's just been taken to an extreme. It's crazy. And what we're seeing today is we're seeing higher rates of depression, suicide, cutting by kids coming out of privileged neighborhoods. I mean, how could it be? In some ways, I think Madeline's research has shown that the level of stress seen by kids in wealthy neighborhoods exceeds what kids are seeing in the inner city. I mean, how could that possibly be? This is self-inflicting damage on our children. And what I think it's come down to is, again, we've narrowed success so much for them, it provides very little room. And what we're doing is crazy stuff, where parents are doing the homework for the kids. And if they get a bad grade, the parents are in the teacher's office immediately saying, do you realize the impact of a B on my student? They won't be able to get into Stanford. So I have to have you change it to an A. And I will fight you. I will fight you as like I'm a cornered bear to get that A because I need. So what are we teaching our kids?
Right.
Very little. We're teaching them how to take tests, get good grades. What about resilience? What about giving kids the opportunity to fail and pick themselves back up? We don't create room for that. And then we schedule them, we completely overschedule them. So they get home from school and they got extracurricular activities and they got 3 hours of homework. What happened to letting kids come home and play and socialize and experience and learn and let their minds grow in ways, creative ways that are unexpected? So that's all been crowded out. And so we've narrowed our definition of business success, we've narrowed our definition of kind of success for our kids. And so that to me is a real issue. And that's why I think schools have to shift their thinking. I think half of what schools should be doing is academics and teaching kids how to learn, and half should be character development. But the character development piece is getting crowded out by all this stuff to try to get these perfect things. And then probably the thing you're hitting on most and foremost is I've spent about 17 or 18 years working on education reform in the inner cities. And it started off as an experiment. It was back at Kleiner Perkins. It was inspired by Al Gore and John Doerr. And they basically said, can we apply venture capital principles to inner city education? And the idea being, can we go find entrepreneurs and give them support and money to go try to do things within the inner city school system to create better outcomes for these kids? And one of the things we learned within the first couple of years is the school environment is critically important to success. And in many ways, in the public schools, you can't create the right environment for a variety of reasons. This idea of charter management organizations came up, and these are independent schools chartered by the district, but aren't subject to union work rules or other kind of regulations. And so it allows a lot more experimentation and trial. And even through that process, a lot of different charter school models were tried. And what was, I think, developed over time was an understanding that some of the charter schools that had very disciplined approaches to education of the kids, expected very high expectations of the kids, very structured environments, the kids actually did really well. And so if there was ever a fable that inner city kids can't be as successful academically as kids in suburbs, that fable's gone. There are incredibly talented kids in the inner city.
Yeah, I used to tutor in the inner city schools in South Central LA, which is not exactly a beacon of education. And that's exactly what I saw, is just there's a hopelessness to what can be accomplished within the system that it left an indelible mark on me. And I consider one of the things that I want to accomplish in my life is to really look at the problem of generational poverty. And generational poverty to me is a mindset, it's not a financial status. And I'll give my own example. There have been times in my life where I was just absolutely destitute and totally broke, but my parents were educated, so they educated me, right? So despite the fact that after school I went through periods of not having money, I always had hope, I always had a future, I had something to work towards, I had the tools that I needed to build something. But when you have generational poverty, you have people who are totally adrift, and they don't have a mindset that sets them up that anything is possible, which of course is a large part behind the show. Before I let you go, answer one question for me. How do you define a life well lived?
I think it's if you live a purposeful life and you're surrounded by people that you love and care about, that share your values and interests, whether it be friends or family. I think there's nothing more joyful than that.
I love that. Dave, thank you so much for coming on, man. What a pleasure.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you.
Guys, this man is incredible. You're going to want to learn more about him. You can find him at the Evergreen Journal. What's the web address?
Well, Tugboat Institute, probably the best place to go.
.com?
.com, and the Evergreen Journal is a sub-tab on that.
Perfect. They've got a lot of incredible articles and things in there, but what I really want you to take away from today's guest is here you have somebody who is dripping in success, and yet the thing that he knows that cuts through the heart of all of that is finding a life that's fulfilling and filled with joy. You didn't once, when I asked him what the definition of success or a life well lived, you never heard about money. And the reason you're not hearing about money is because there is something so much more profound and powerful beyond that. Beautiful relationships, finding meaning, purpose, and chasing it. And this is somebody who echoes that in his every action. I have been incredibly grateful to have been a part of the Tugboat Institute, and he has brought together some of the most incredibly kind, generous, driven, ambitious people who are trying to take over the world, but they're trying to do it from a beautiful place, and that is very much an echo of this man's personality and the type of people that I think only he can bring together. So I hope that you've enjoyed your time with him as much as I have. I know that I will get the joy of spending more time with him off camera, but this is one to rewatch and really listen to the things he says, because they are all true and they were all powerful, and they will take you to where you actually want to go in your life. And guys, if you want to come and be a part of this audience and meet incredible people like this man, reach out to us. You can find us on InsideQuest.com. You can subscribe to our socials. You can get tickets here by writing us. Sitting right there is Cindy. She's the one that takes care of all this stuff. So it's real people behind the scenes here trying to help you guys get what you want. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. And if you're listening to this on Stitcher or iTunes, I hope you're listening at 2x, because I sound a whole lot smarter. All right, guys, until next time, be legendary, my friends. Take care. Thank you, man. What a pleasure.